I was asked to give a quick little intro. So my name is Chris Scalici. I'm a trained medical illustrator from RIT in Rochester, New York. I've been with Visible Body for, I'd lose count, but I think it's 19 years now, a very long time. I've worked here as an illustrator, as a medical modeler, 3D medical animator, the UX user design person, and right now I am the product owner of the team that works on Human Anatomy Atlas. So I think the chances are, if you've sent in any type of customer requests, either through your sales rep or through our customer support, that it's probably landed in my email. So thank you for all that feedback. So you're here today to learn a little bit about lecturing in 3D versus lecturing in 2D. So I'm going to start off by just sharing my screen, and then if someone could just let me know that that's working.
Yep, you're good.
Good. Okay. Thank you. Let me get my notes up here. Okay, so we're going to talk today about lecturing in 3D versus traditional 2D. By that, I mean, I know many people work, create notes in PowerPoint or maybe Google Slides, and that requires a lot of prep work. A lot of work on your end, either labeling images, or I've seen people just take pictures with maybe their phone, where they stick a sticky note either on a physical model or some kind of tag on a cadaver. Basically anything they can do to get those notes into that program, they'll do. But what we want to talk about today is using the model in Human Anatomy Atlas in real time. We can manipulate this thing, we can turn stuff on and off, we can show whatever anatomy we want on the fly, and that should make teaching a little bit more effortless, more flexible, more interactive, and more engaging. So the first thing I want to talk about is the prep work involved. I'm going to tell you that if you're fluent in what you're teaching, you have to do almost no prep work using the 3D model. I would say if I could hear all of you, I think there'd be some applause right now. Maybe there is, hopefully. So we're going to try and take a lot of the prep work out for you. So you just have to come with your knowledge and a copy of 3D Human Anatomy Atlas, and you can be on your way. So the first thing here is we can see we're on the main menu, and we've done a lot of work for you already. We have these things called quick views. So everything you see here, and these scroll on for up and down for a few pages. These are all views that our editorial team and content team has put together based on your A&P textbooks or your lab manuals or your dissection guides, or maybe even your gross anatomy atlas. So we've tried to align content for you and give you some choices right from the start, so you don't have to make your own views. The thing I want to go to first, I'm going to pretend I'm teaching maybe about the knee today. So I want to point out that you can browse through all these things here. Again, we're in the systems section right now, but there's also a region section and a gross anatomy section, which is sort of regional based on grants dissector. And this person would be lying down. We also have some cross sections in here, what we call microanatomy, which is your 5 senses and a few other things, and some muscle actions. But again, I want to start with the knee. So to surface all of this, instead of browsing through this catalog, you can go right down here to what's called content search. And I'm going to launch that, and I'm just going to type in knee and see what I get. So again, I'm interested in teaching the ligaments. So up here in this structure section, I'm going to click on ligaments of the knee R, which means the right side. And you can see what that does is, throws a view on screen. It's a limited view, which is kind of what I want. It just has the bones involved with the knee joint and these ligaments here. So I want to talk about selection first. So every time I click on something, it'll highlight blue, and I'll get the name of it up here, and we call it Infobox. And I'm going to get to this Infobox in depth a little bit later. But as you're teaching, we don't need a flat image that has a label that tells you that this is the LCL. We can go in here and sort of click on everything and get our label right here. And maybe these are a little distracting. I'm just going to quickly hide them to get a little better view. But maybe you want to highlight more than one thing at a time and talk about it. Maybe I want to say all the ligaments on the lateral side of the knee, and I want to highlight those. So I can use either multi-select down here, or I can hold shift while I click. and I can select more than one thing. And you'll see the last thing I select will be the name that shows up here. So this is if I want to show more than one thing highlighted at a time. And then let's say I want to give a little quick, maybe I went through these and we talked about them and what they do, and I want to give a quick little impromptu quiz. I'm going to show you something really cool right now. It's called 3D Draw. So down in the Annotate section, you'll see I have this draw tool. Some people get intimidated by this. All you have to do is drag up and down until this blue plane intersects with about the level you want to draw. Hit start drawing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just throw some arrows on this and just show you how you could potentially give a quick quiz on these ligaments. So if I just pick a few different colored arrows, right? Maybe I got a black one, red one. Let's just keep going down the rainbow here. Maybe a green one. And maybe I just want to throw in this little guy here too. So you can imagine, you're in the middle of a lecture here and you've taught these ligaments and you want to ask about them. So you could say, all right, everybody, take out a piece of paper or send me, something, and say what the red arrow is, the orange arrow, the green arrow, blue arrow, black arrow, things like that. So it's just a quick way to label a few things and have people give you some answers. But the cool thing is, I mentioned it's called 3D Draw. So as I rotate, these are actually stuck in the view. So if someone, maybe you want to rotate to a little bit different angle after you've labeled it, you can do that as well. So now I'm going to just clear out those drawings real quick. And we're going to talk about, maybe as I was teaching this, someone asked me, excuse me, Mr. Scalici, when you first loaded this view, you hit a couple things. What were those? Were those ligaments? Can you teach me a little bit more about that? If I want to get this view back to the state where I started, up here is this little refresh button. And when I hit that, it should restore it to the way it was when I launched it. And again, since I'm fluent in what I'm teaching here, I know that these quadricep muscles are what attach here. So I can use the anatomy search to add stuff to this particular view. So if I go up here and maybe I just type in rectus femoris, and I'm going to pick the one on the right because that's the side of the knee we're on, and you'll see it'll add it to my view. But that doesn't get me quite what I wanted, so I'm just going to show you just really quickly how to add a little bit more here. This is called the breadcrumb trail or anatomical hierarchy. If I open this up, I can kind of scroll through and see the groups that this is part of, and I know that I want to turn on all of the quadriceps muscles. So I do that, and then here's my view, and then I can explain what these retinacular are for. So you're not locked into the view you started with. Just if you had made a slide of this thing, it would have been whatever it was when you started. But in 3D, you can change your mind. You can sort of go with the flow and answer questions as they come up. And then let's just say that maybe, let me refresh this again to get rid of those muscles. Let's say I didn't want anybody to know the things I was clicking on. Instead, I wanted to ask them about them, right? Let's pretend I wanted to click on this, but I don't want this box to come up. I don't want anyone to see this information. There's a button in the corner here. We either call it full screen mode or hide menus. So when I click that, it'll make the box go away. And then anything I click on from here on out won't show up. So you can even, click on things and sort of ask questions, quiz your class on the fly like that. And then I'll just point out too that we had this on-screen joystick. You can see it more now. It doesn't go away when I hit full screen mode. So if you're not really comfortable in here with the mouse controls, you can use this thing as well. And if you are comfortable in here, you've seen me, I went in here earlier and I used these hide buttons to get rid of this stuff. But if you know some of the keyboard controls, there'll be a PDF later that we give out, or maybe, in a couple days that has some links on it that go with this presentation. But if you know the keyboard controls, you can hit H on your keyboard and that does hide. So you can really go through this view and you can dissect down, just using the keyboard and the mouse, and you don't actually need that info box up if you don't want it. Okay, so I think, Emily, we were going to just stop there to ask if there are any questions before I get too far, I think.
Sure. So does anybody have any questions right now? We don't have any, I don't see any in the chat yet. Let me scan to see if anyone has their hands raised. Oh, we've got, James has his hand raised. Go ahead, James. All you have to do is unmute yourself and you can ask a question.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking at another page, and I'm using a Mac, and sometimes it seems like I can't get the image in the right location on the screen. So I would like to use the manual, but I didn't see how you turn the thing in the upper left-hand corner that allows you to scroll and, to move left, right, things like that, to rotate. How do you make that appear? Is that in
Good
settings?
question. Yep, great question. So up here in the settings menu, you'll see this controls. In here, you're going to toggle this on.
Okay, got it.
You can see when I turn it off, it goes away. When I go here, it turns back on.
Okay.
Great question.
Do you have any other questions, James?
Other than I don't understand why the trackpad on my Mac is so klutzy. It just doesn't seem to.
We're
Sometimes
working on
it expands it, it makes it huge, and other times it moves it off the screen.
Yeah, we're working on improving that a bit. The trackpads are a little bit tricky. One piece of advice I can give you is if you double tap on something, it'll center it up on your screen.
Okay.
And that might help you with having to zoom in and out so much.
Okay. That's good. Thanks.
Yep.
Thank you. And then we do have a question about, is there a list of short keys like you demonstrated for hiding, etc., available? So the keyboard shortcuts. We do have a video.
Yes, there is one. I could potentially paste it in the chat, or we can wait until after.
That's fine.
Let me see. I can paste it in the chat right now.
Any other questions while Chris is doing that?
Is it called Q&A during a presentation? Is that what I need to put it in?
Nope, just chat.
All right. I don't seem to have a chat. Maybe because.
Oh, it's okay.
I got it. Here we go.
You got it? Okay.
Yep. Sorry.
No problem. And then there's a question, if you could repeat how you use the arrows to annotate.
Sure. Yeah, I did that pretty quickly. Okay. So we were about here from the side. And what I did was I went down to this menu, annotate. And when I open it, I went to this draw. And the first thing you're going to do is drag up or down like this is showing, and position this plane about where those ligaments are. So somewhere in here, and then hit start drawing. Now I have these tools available. I chose the arrow and I made it as skinny as possible. And then I just picked different colors. And all you have to do is you're going to start with the arrowhead when you click. You click down and just drag out. I could make all orange arrows if I wanted to. I was just trying to differentiate here. And this is just the arrow tool. I mean, there are all sorts of other, tools we have. You can kind of do whatever you want here.
Yes, and the question, is this not available in the 2019 version? It is not. So the 3D draw tool is an update. If you're using Visible Body courseware to teach the course, you will get free updates every time we update. So just your rep will follow up with you, and if you have any questions about using courseware, your rep can help. Okay, great. And then Chris, could you do that just one more time? There's a request to do the arrows.
Yeah. All right, here we go. Annotate, draw, and then I'm going to move this blue piece of graph paper here up until about the area where the ligaments are, and I hit this big green button, start drawing. Then I have to pick a tool, so I'm going to go pick my arrow, and I'm just going to choose a color, and then all I'm doing is clicking and dragging. That's it. Every time I click and drag will be, another arrow, long or short. And to change the color, you just kind of click down here.
And the great news is you can't break it. So you can play around and get a feel for it. You can always hit refresh, come back to it. So, you know, this is just get in there and get hands-on and play around.
Yep, and I see a question about why do I have to drag the graph paper? That's because this thing's in 3D. So wherever that graph paper is where this thing is going to draw. So when I rotate it around, it sticks to that point. If I hadn't moved the graph paper to the correct place, it would have just drawn much closer to or much further from me. And when I rotated in space, it wouldn't be labeling what I thought it was labeling.
Okay, great. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
I think we can go to the next section.
Okay, let me just move my chat out of the way. So the next section is going to be all about this info box. It has a lot of really great information. Again, we do have a support article on it that we can provide at the end. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to talk about the skeleton. And I want to show a few things. The first thing I want to show is maybe today I'm teaching about the appendicular skeleton versus the axial skeleton. And someone might ask, all right, well, what bones are part of each one? I can go up here into this anatomical hierarchy or breadcrumb trail and go up until I see appendicular and click it. Then I get a nice blue selection of everything in the appendicular skeleton. And I can do the sort of the inverse there. I can click on maybe one of the ribs and go up and show what is part of the axial skeleton. You can kind of do this for anything. It works great for the skeleton, especially maybe when you're talking about the vertebra. I can say, you know, here are all the lumbar ones. Click on one of these thoracic ones. Here are all the thoracic ones, you know, all the way up. It also works pretty good on the skull. And I know a lot of people learn the skull in sort of two parts. You learn the facial skeleton, and then you learn the brain case. So I can go in here and pick the bones of the facial skeleton. Same thing, pick one of these guys and get some of the brain case. So this is a way, you know, the reason I'm showing you this is to use this info box to get some selections on screen so you can get ideas of different groups of anatomy. And depending what you've clicked on, there's going to be different things you can do up here. So since we're on bones, let's stick with that. And let's talk about bony landmarks. So, you know, some people have a box of bones or bones that have red or blue paint for origins insertions on them. We have that same kind of thing here. So when I have a bone selected, I'm going to look right to this area. This is called Explored Bone Mode. And when I come in here, there are two options. We're going to start off with bony landmarks. As you can see, this is a rainbowy, we call it the rainbow map. This labels all of the landmarks that are commonly taught. As I click on each one, I'm going to get the name up here. And some of them, when you click on them, will actually tell you what attaches to them. So you can see here, this is the attachment for the MCL. And you can use this thing kind of like a flashcard too. If I went in and did this mode, I can go in and start, you know, clicking on things and asking people about them. You know, I always remember when I was in school, I always remember greater trochanter for some reason. I think it was just a word maybe I hadn't heard before and it stuck with me. But you can go in here and use this, you know, just like a flashcard, clicking on each thing. If I exit back out of here, we can talk about now the muscles that attach to this bone. So I'm going to click over in the corner to muscle attachments. And you'll see I have this red and blue paint for origin insertion, and I have all these pins. Let's go up here and choose one of these pins. Every time I click a pin, it's going to turn that muscle on, right? And then if I want to turn the muscle off, I can click on it and then hide it. But I can go through here and sort of turn on as many of these pins as I want. And one thing I haven't talked about yet is maybe I want to understand what, you know, piriformis does. I can click on this little definition here, and it sort of tells me all about it right in this view, which is actually about the bone. And then if I exit out of this mode, I want to point out the related content. So I happen to be on the femur, and we actually have a long bone femur of what we call microanatomy. I can dive in here. And this has a little bit more detail. You know, for example, you can see that there's articular cartilage, or you can maybe learn about the cortical bone versus the cancellous bone, or the bone marrow, or the cavity. So that's just a way to get a little bit more information there. And then while we're talking about the bones and sort of extra information, this view is pretty awesome here, this disarticulated skull for learning. You know, to me, this is just super cool because one of the most interesting bones to look at is this sphenoid bone. It's just so cool, and it's hard to understand how all of these bones come together. So you can scrub. This is called the scrubber play handle. You can grab that and see, and I can get in as close as I want here, and see how these things come together. You know, one of the more interesting ones is to show how some of these foramen are made between different bones as they come together. So this view is, this view is really cool and unique. And then I'll move on to, the muscles. So I'm going to open this view and just a way to turn on an entire system. We have a whole nother webinar we did last week that explains how to get different anatomy on screen in a very efficient way. But right now I'm just going to blast on the whole muscular system. And maybe today I'm going to talk about the shoulder joint. And again, we're going to use the Infobox to kind of get some selections on screen. So I'm going to pick this middle head of the deltoid. And I'm going to show how you can use this breadcrumb trail here to then select maybe the whole deltoid, right? To explain it has 3 different heads. And then maybe I want to take it a step further and, maybe I want to talk about the whole shoulder joint here. And all the different muscles involved. And, this view could be too complicated for what I'm looking for. So one thing I can do is I'm starting in this view with all the muscles. I can take my selection here of the shoulder joint, and I can use this button here called isolate mode. And this is going to bring whatever I have selected, everything blue, into its own view, just on the side. I can always get back to the view I was just in. But, on its own, it's probably a little bit hard to study. So there's another awesome button here called Radius Blast. And when I hit that, it's going to turn on some anatomy that it thinks is relevant to what you're trying to get on screen. Again, I'm going to go to this pec major and get some of this rib cage on. And if I want the whole rib cage, I'm going to show you, I can go up here and turn that on. And then now we have a nice little view of the shoulder joint. And I forgot to do it before, but I'm just going to save this stuff as I go so I can get back to it later and show you how powerful this is. So here I am, I'm in this view. I got all the shoulder joint muscles on here, and then maybe I want to teach about pec major today and how it has these 3 distinct heads. And, I can click through them one at a time and see the names appear. I can actually close this breadcrumb trail to make it a little easier to see. But another thing I wanted to show you were these tags. So if I have something selected and I hit add tag, it's going to add this 3D tag on screen, and I can tag every one of these heads of pec major. And just like before, these are stuck there in 3D, so I can move around and in here and they'll stay. Another cool thing you can do is if you click on a tag, it'll actually select that muscle for you. And then just so I cover all my bases here, you can go in and into the settings menu and blank these tags out. And you could potentially, ask a student to identify each one. Okay, so now I'm gonna, if I leave isolate mode, so if you remember, I took all of these muscles of the shoulder in here. If I leave isolate mode, I'm gonna get this warning that tells me I'm about to throw away what I've just done, which I'm cool with because I'm done with it. And it'll take me right back here. And then I wanna talk about using, maybe the next thing, a different day, I'm gonna talk about these muscles of facial expression, and there are a lot of them. So I'm just gonna highlight one, and then I'm gonna go up here and just find them all. So maybe you can explain to students, these are muscles of facial expression, whereas maybe the masseter is, that's more for mastication, or these are actually muscles of the neck to bend your head back and forth. But here we're talking about muscles of facial expression. And, there are a lot of them, and they're hard to remember. So maybe I was teaching and someone said, hey, where's the rosarius muscle? And I was like, ooh, I don't know. I don't want to fumble too much in here. So I can go in and I can use this to identify the muscle in my view. So here I am, I'm gonna show the left one. You can see this says show me because it's already in the view. And there you go. It takes me right to it. And, you know, maybe I'm super unfamiliar with this muscle. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to hear this or not, but I can hit this pronunciation button. Rosorius. And hear a pronunciation in English for that. Okay, now let's talk a little bit more about muscles and what you can do with them. I'm going to shift over here to the superficial masseter. And I showed you a little bit before, when you open the definition for each muscle, you're going to get this important information here with the origin, insertion, innervation, action, and blood supply. This is just textural data. But what I can do is I can actually go in here to this details button. Before, you saw with if I had a bone selected, I had that pelvis up here, but here we have this muscle details button. When I click that, it's going to bring this superficial masseter into a view with the relevant bones. In this case, I'm studying a muscle and the bones it attaches to, where before we were studying a bone and the muscle that attaches to it. So you're coming at it from a different angle with the muscle as your focus. If I click on each pin, it's going to tell me the name of that bone that it attaches to. And just like we have all this information here, we have it right here visually. So I'm going to close that definition. Right now, I'm just looking at muscle attachments. Here, I'll see the blood supply with the artery here that supplies this muscle. Then I have innervation. And here's details, which puts all three together. You know, one cool thing about some of these muscles is they have an associated muscle action that goes with them. So I'm in here learning about superficial masseter, and I can go to this view, which is, I think it's mandible elevation, and kind of see this muscle in action. Just like that exploding disarticulated skull before, I can kind of scrub this thing along and see this muscle in action. So I think I was going to stop there. There's definitely more to talk about, but this might be a good spot to maybe take a couple of questions.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So I answered a few questions in the chat. I'm just going to scroll the chat now to see if I missed any.
As Emily's scrolling, there was one that I wanted to double check with you, Chris, on sort of going back to drawing on the models. When you're drawing on the models, I can't remember off the top of my head, but are you able to draw an arrow and save the arrow as part of your favorite?
Yeah, that's a good question. So let me just first explain just the ideology in software development. So what we try and do is create tools that people need, and then we incrementally make them better. So the version that I'm using now, when you make an arrow on here, again, I'm going to do everybody's favorite, which is the old eye patch here, right? And say we drew an eye patch on this person, right? Here we are. You know, or it could have been an arrow, right? Here we are, we drew our arrow on here to this guy's eye. You'll see that before, I had a button down here that said save view. I know this says save view, but it's save note now. Meaning that when I press this, it only saves a 2D image to my library of things that I have. In the future though, you know, in the next year, we're gonna have the ability to save these in 3D so that when you reload this view, it doesn't save it as a flat image. You'll be in here in 3D, just like I am. So the tools I'm showing you now are made for on-the-fly lecture at the moment. And you can only save a flat image of them, but you know, we're definitely aware of the value this would bring to be able to save this in 3D, and it's being worked on now, and it's close.
Great, thank you. And then we have another question about the muscle actions. So do we have muscle actions for all muscles? I don't think so.
Not for all muscles, no. I think, you know, some of the more specific ones, like we don't have muscle actions for the ocular muscles, and we don't have anything for the pelvis, meaning the pelvis itself, like, you know, Kegel exercises or things like that. But we do have muscle actions for most other, I would say, I think we have it for most muscles that work on moving bones and joints. I think there are about 60 of them. If you want, I can just quickly, you know, give you a little, sort of a little overview of what's in here.
Yep, so Chris is on the main menu where you can go right to muscle actions. Previously, he showed that you could also get to muscle actions by clicking on a muscle, and then in that info box, there'll be related content. So there'll be a muscle action for that muscle there as well. So often there's more than one way of doing something in the app.
Right, exactly.
All right, and then we've got a question from Christian. Can a simulation be done on this anatomical figure? So I'm not sure I understand the question, so I think I will unmute Christian to ask live, if that's all right.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead, Christian, you just need to unmute yourself and you can tell us more about your question.
So can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so sometimes when you are teaching some of this stuff, you want to show maybe a heartbeat, or maybe you want to show a tongue movement or stuff like that. I want to do a little bit more, especially things like dealing with females. You want to sort of do a simulation on what would show us a dense tissue, because we do a lot of active learning, maybe on breast material to make them understand what is important in filling your breast, making sure that you don't have any clumps or anything in there. And sometimes you want to add a few things here and there, and then to show how they sort of move. And so far, I haven't seen anything like that.
I don't think we have anything in that area.
Okay.
Good question, though. Thank you.
Yeah, we do have a beating heart, and we have physiology animations. They're not in Atlas. We're looking at the Atlas app today, but within courseware, you have access to all the visible body apps. So I would recommend looking at pathology and physiology that has a beating heart, and then the physiology animations walk through complicated physiological processes that you could also, we talked to a lot of professors who use those as lecture tools. They just mute, they come with audio. So the students could watch them on their own, but you could also mute the audio on those and play them, pause them, and walk through the processes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay, and so we have another question from Brian. Does this software sync with an LMS like Moodle? I can take that question. Right now, we have a single sign-on integration with Canvas, but coming in the very near future, I think within the next year, we should have deep integrations with Canvas and Blackboard, and then we'll be working on the other LMSs after that. But with courseware, we have a lot of professors using courseware that you can link out to courseware, and you can link out to specific assignments within your LMS. So we're happy to help you do that. Again, we have a lot of professors using courseware with all the LMSs. So definitely get in touch with us and we can show you how to do that. Okay, and I think that is it for questions right now.
You know what, there was one that I think, sorry to interrupt. There was one I think got lost in the shuffle a couple minutes back from Darcy. It says, how do you get to the info box to start? Which box is it? I'm not exactly sure what it is, but could we maybe?
Yeah, so.
Was she just referring to, do you know what that means, Chris? I wasn't really clear.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know what Infobox means. I'm not sure if we're using the same terminology, but this is the Infobox. When I click on anything and it highlights blue, this is going to come up. If I know you can't see exactly what I'm doing, but now I'm clicking on the background to get rid of it and deselecting. So anytime something's selected, this thing is going to show up on you. You can kind of push it like most of the way off the screen here, not all the way, if you want to keep it up just a little bit. But it will be there unless you've clicked this button here. It'll be there every time you select anything. I'm not sure if Darcy, that's what you were asking about. If it wasn't, let me know.
Okay.
All right, so
I think
move
we are
on a
good.
little bit.
Chrissy, if we didn't answer your question, just post it in the chat again and we can get right back to you at the next break.
Okay. So let's move on to a few more of these, either pre-made views or, these existing quick views that will do a lot of work for you. So in the next couple of minutes, I want to talk about maybe nerves and blood vessels, because those get kind of complicated. There are a ton of them, and it's hard to keep them straight. But I think one of the best views we have for explaining why lecturing in 3D is easier than 2D is this cranial fossa guy, either cranial fossa or the cranial nerves. Because you'll see when I go in here, and again, I've seen a presentation someone has given that has had, I don't know, 30 different little pieces of sticky note stuck into different holes, and it says what nerve goes through each foramen. But this 3D view does a ton of work for you. It's going to show you each cranial nerve and each foramen that it goes through. So, if we take this guy here, the trigeminal nerve, and I'm going to use this breadcrumb trail here just to get all of it since there's so many parts. You can follow this thing in and see how it goes through each one of these foramen and then, comes out on the other side to supply the face. And you can imagine trying to show this stuff in 2D, how many pictures you might need to do this. And here we just have this one view. The ones in the back are a little bit easier to see, but we just have this one view, and you can go in here and, just getting these relationships in 3D is just so much more valuable. So I really like this view for that reason. Another view we have that's also really good is the vagus nerve view, which is in nervous here, this vagus nerve. So again, we're talking about spatial relationships, and you don't get this in 2D where we can look at this aortic arch and see how it wraps around, the bronchus here. We can even go in and maybe turn on some of these pulmonary vessels, just to get a good feel, and you can see how the vagus nerve runs between here. And then we could even look at maybe the esophagus and see its positioning and how it's a flatter collapse shape compared to the trachea, which has these tracheal rings to support it. And then we could even follow these things down, through the diaphragm to see how they come out. Here we go with, this would be where the stomach is. But these views are just, to me, they're really cool to learn these relationships, and really this, I don't think 2D imaging can even touch this 3D experience here. And then let's talk about a few areas that are, difficult to learn in general. So one of them, I think, most people would agree that the brachial plexus might be one of the worst things you have to learn, just because it's so complicated. So, I have a view here on my nervous system views. If I didn't know where to look, I could have gone down here to content search and looked for it. But I'm going to open up this brachial plexus view. And, what we're talking about is in this bundle of nerves under here. I'm going to use this breadcrumb trail again. I'm just going to get the one on the right side. And, you can see it here. This might be another case, though, where maybe we would like to isolate this thing into its own view. So just like before, where I did it with those shoulder muscles, I'm going to go all the way over here to this button, isolate mode, bring it into its own view. And then maybe I want to talk about, what's a trunk, what's a cord. I can go in here and highlight the different trunks, right? I can just keep going along and say, all right, these are the divisions, and then down here, these are the cords. And, I could even follow it all up here and see which spinal nerves or spinal roots these things originate from. And this is really cool. Maybe I'm finding this a little bit hard to follow. So one other quick little tip I want to give you is you can turn on the skeletal system in here just to get some reference. And I only want to deal with the right arm right now. So I'm going to go in here and make sure this is the right arm. And by selecting this, whatever I turn on or off here will only affect that region, the right arm. So we're going to turn the right arm here, kind of get a good feel for where these cross underneath this clavicle. But again, you can imagine, everyone knows learning the brachial plexus is tough, but once you have it in 3D, it's a little bit easier. And you can also go down here and maybe trace up some nerves, right? Let's say we wanted to see where this radial nerve comes from, kind of, you know, follow it up and see what's involved. So I think it's really good for, you know, a complicated model like that. Then, you know, since we're in the nervous system, I'm gonna exit isolate mode, go back to where I started. And then I want to talk about the brain. So I'm just going to show you quickly how I can pare this down too. If I want to peel off everything in the head, I can go to this head and neck section, and I'm just going to quickly turn off all the muscles, and I'm even going to turn off the skeleton here, and might as well turn off digestive to get a look at this brain. So here we have dura mater. I'm going to hide this, and then we can talk about the brain. So if this is my first day teaching the brain, I might say, you know, something like, yeah, the brain has two hemispheres, a left and a right, and it has a bunch of lobes. You have a cerebrum, you have a cerebellum. And you'll notice when I click on some of these different gyri, right, this individual gyrus here, or the sulcus, I'm not seeing information about the lobes. I'm seeing the topology here. And I wanted to give you a little tip there, which is, again, I'm going to use this breadcrumb trail, and I can pick the frontal lobe so I can see, you know, the lobes. Instead of the individual pieces, I can get the lobe up on screen. And then maybe I want to, you know, take it even a step further, and I want to learn about maybe the functional areas where different kinds of information is processed. So I have a piece of brain selected, has the Infobox open. I'm going to go to this little guy here, and this takes me into cerebral landmark mode, which is going to let me click on these different areas and see what they are, right? Primary motor cortex, Wernicke's area. You know, I can go through here, and I could do the same thing as before. If I want to go into this sort of hide mode and click on things and ask people about them, I can do that also, just kind of like a flashcard. All right, so I'm going to exit out here. And let's keep going. Let's start talking about some blood vessels. So one thing I want to do is maybe talk about the celiac trunk, which again, it supplies a bunch of different things, and it's a little bit complicated. So I'm going to go in here and type in celiac so I can kind of surface some relevant anatomy. And I like this view here, the stomach vasculature. So it has, again, it's a pre-made view, a view we've made for you. You can go right in here to celiac trunk. You can see if I double click it, it's going to take me like way up in there and center on it so I can zoom around it. But you know, this is kind of complicated too. And I need the organs in here to understand what I'm looking at. So I don't want to get rid of the organs, but there is a way to make this a little bit clearer. Again, I'm going to use breadcrumb trail here and pick the whole celiac trunk. So here it is in blue. I can kind of follow it around and see it. But this is sort of a neat little trick. We have this button called Select Others. If I click that, it's not exactly an X-ray mode, but what it does is it selects everything else and really lets the red blood vessels stand out against the blue background here to give me a better look at it. And if I wanted to, I could even fade this stuff and, you know, look around again, kind of see where everything is. And then, you know, learn about each individual part. Or I can even highlight it again, kind of see that in blue through here as well. So that's just a neat little trick to, you know, sort of get your inverse selection. It kind of looks like an X-ray, but it's really not. And then I have one more thing to show. So let me save this view just so I have another one because I keep forgetting to do that. I'm just calling this guy stomach. And I want to talk about using the anatomy search again to locate, you know, something difficult. So I want to talk about lumbosacral plexus. And again, this is another one that's kind of hard to teach because there are, you know, nerves crisscrossing everywhere. But what I wanted to really mention here was that you can use this anatomy search to find anatomy that's on screen as well. So maybe I'm interested in, I don't know, maybe the pudendal nerve. You can see there are a lot of things that have the word pudendal in them, and I can use this filter here to filter out the systems I don't want. So, you know, I'm talking about the nerve, that's what I'm interested in. So if I turn my filter on and just click on just this symbol here for the brain for the nervous system, I just get a few things here. And I'm on the left side, so I'm going to say show me, and you can see that it highlights it for me and helps me find it, so I don't have to poke around in here if I'm not exactly sure. And you know, the same trick applies here. You can just select others to kind of show it a little clearer, and I could even fade these things and then maybe select this guy and sort of get in here and follow its pathway down. Okay, I think maybe we'll stop here and see if there are any questions.
Okay, so let's see. So we had a question about videos for students, because obviously webinars right now are focused on professors, and we are thinking about offering some webinars for students, so stay tuned for those. But for now, we have a ton of very short videos on our website. So if you just go to visiblebody.com, then click support, and just go into, most of you are probably using courseware. So I'd go into courseware, and there are lots of videos there that teach students how to use the apps. You could also go into the apps themselves. So that'd be a great place to send the students, and those videos are all on YouTube as well. And again, they're brief. They're like 30 seconds to a minute, showing how to do these specific things. And then let's see. Radius Blast is wonderful. Yep, we agree. It's very easy to use too. Let's see. And then I don't think, Matt, have I missed any questions since the last time?
Let's see. Oh, one thing I did want to add regarding student resources is, for those of you that do use courseware, the very first folder that we put in all of those pre-made courses is basically a student resources folder that helps them get started. So it'll link out to those walkthroughs, those videos, how they can download the apps, all that stuff. So you shouldn't have to worry too much about taking on the burden of teaching them how to navigate things. The only other question, I thought there was one more.
Actually, there is another one from Darcy. How did you get to color mode? And I think I know what she's talking about. I'd like to unmute you, Darcy. That way you can talk to us directly. Go ahead. You just have to unmute yourself.
Okay. Hi. Sorry.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you guys for hosting this. When we were doing the brain and then he was going over the topography, then all of a sudden he pressed some button and then you saw all the different fields in different colors. I didn't follow what exactly he pressed, and if there's a link then to what, like if that's your occipital cortex, when it became color mode, was there a link to what that cortex, that area represents? There it is. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, so just to show you how I got here, if I have any part of the cerebrum, left or right, selected, this little button's going to show up here in the corner. If I click that, it's going to take me into this functional area mode. And as I click on it, that's a good question. So I just showed you the name, but if you crack open the definition, it's going to tell you a little bit about it and what it does.
Okay, and can you just do that one more time? And is that on everything or just the brain that it does? I'm assuming it's just the brain, right?
Yeah, so
okay.
For this, well, kind of. So for the functional areas of the brain, I mean, it's definitely just the brain because that's what we're talking about, right? But when I showed you a little bit earlier, you can do the same thing for the skeleton. You can do for a few other things too. I didn't talk about the teeth, but the teeth have one. They let you go in here and you can kind of see the same thing. You know, what's a crown versus a neck versus a root versus, you know, what are these different cusps and the fossa and the surfaces. But I would just say keep a lookout. The brain has stuff, the bones have, you know, this mode here or this mode. And then the muscles don't have a rainbow mode, but they do have a little button that takes you into an extra area.
Okay, and one more time, show me the button once again for the brain. I just don't know why I'm having a mental block
Here's
here.
my brain, and I'm going up here to this guy.
Okay, and does it say details on it? When I hover over it, it'll say details above it?
It should, yeah.
Like yours is doing. Okay, great, thanks. Sorry.
Yep. If you
Thank
have the same version of Atlas as this guy, which is 2020.0.11, you will see the same thing that I see.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and that details tab, that's really those buttons, those last two in the info box are where, you know, you can drill down for more details on the structure. So for example, like Chris was showing the muscles, the red pin is in that location. And then when he was showing the bone with the bony landmarks, the bony landmark icon is in that location. So it's just I guess think of it as the more details button. That's always the place to look.
Got it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Oops.
You're welcome. Any other questions? We hope that this has been helpful. I'll just give a little talk for just a minute.
I have a little bit
just
more,
kind of-
if I can go for 5 more minutes.
Oh yeah. Sorry, Chris, go ahead.
No, that's okay. Sorry, I stopped and then let you know. I just want to talk about favorites and tours real quick. So, you know, this whole presentation was about lecturing on the fly, but if I did make something really cool, you saw me save a few along the way, but if I save a favorite or save a view, it's going to show up in my favorite section. So maybe I spent a lot of time making one of these views. You know, here's that aortic arch one that I was so proud of earlier. I can use this, you know, over and over. And another thing I want to talk about are tours really quickly. So tours are sort of like a slide deck of favorites. You would make one by hitting the start button, and then you have to pick a few different favorites. So yeah, I'll just pick these last 3 here and save it, and it'll show up in my tours. And when I go to it, I just want to point out that when you go here, you have this one extra row, which lets you cycle between all the tour stops you put in. We call them tour stops. This view can be used just like anything I've shown you so far. When I go to the next stop, it'll load. I was doing some muscles of the hip here, and then, you know, here we have that aortic arch view. So you can string these together and make a tour if you'd like to. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on were, we call them pre or post lecture resources. So you'll notice that there's a quizzes button in here. These are just for, you know, students or even maybe yourself to just test yourself on. These don't report anywhere out of this app. But, you know, this is sort of a cool one. Circle of Willis asking me to identify different things, you know, different arteries, or in this case, I guess I just randomly got that one right. But, you know, this is great for either pre or post lecture. If we had just learned about Circle of Willis, this would have been a great one to assign. And then the other thing I wanted to touch on too is under this quizzes, we also have these things called lab activities. There's a button here. You'll be able to get some pre-made labs that we have. And then these are the views that go along with them. These are kind of locked down compared to the other ones. So I can't add to this view. I can sort of dissect out of it, but it's sort of in a controlled environment, just like if you were to give a student, you know, a sheep's brain or a cow heart or whatever people are dissecting these days in labs. It just keeps them focused so they can't really mess around too much. But if students do have mobile devices that have AR on them, these labs are really cool in AR, which is augmented reality. It'll make this model come right up out of the paper. Super cool. And then the last thing I wanted to show was we have additional resources here. Let me see if I can get that up real quick. There's a page, and I think you'll have this in the PDF we send out. But visiblebody.com, and then under resources, there are all sorts of things. Those lab activities, there's a blog, there are ebooks, there's a Learn site, videos, and student handouts. So we have all this extra information that's available to you as well to kind of help you along. All right, Emily, that was it.
All right, thank you. Thanks so much, Chris. Any final questions? We've got a few minutes left. Yeah, so we covered a lot today. Chris covered a lot. There's a lot of functionality in Atlas, but like I mentioned earlier, you can't break it. And again, those pre-made views are already set up to lecture without prep work on your part. You can just click in. The library is pretty extensive. So we hope that you will take advantage of those and use them in your course. But we are happy to stay on if there are any other questions.
And I would definitely urge people to watch that other video we did, which was how to build views, because I did kind of fly through that here just because it really wasn't the topic of this presentation. But if you want to master some of that other video has some good stuff in it.
And those are all posted. Thanks, Chris. Those are all posted on our website, visiblebody.com. Go to the instructor section, and then there's a section called webcasts and demos. They're all listed there. So, all right. Well, thank you so much. Thanks to all of our attendees for joining us today. Thank you so much, Chris. Please do feel free to reach out if you have any other questions. There are lots of places on our website where you can fill out forms, and those go directly to my team, Human Beings. We get back to you within 24 hours. So please do reach out with any additional questions. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good afternoon.
Well, thank you.
Bye-bye.